It's been a while since I checked out the lore of Valorant, originally after I released the initial video. I backed away because there was no way I could keep covering two universes at once. I also didn't want to split my viewers into the League camp and the Valorant camp. That was in 2020. 2023 is a whole different story. With League's current pace of delivering lore, not only can I afford to cover two universes at once, but I'm confident I can do a lot more. And when it comes to being worried about splitting my viewership, it's gonna be fine. And if you are one of the people who are confused about why I am not covering League's lore anymore, I am. In fact, I am covering it as fast as it comes out. Anyway, since it has been a while, I had to do a bit of catch-up myself. The last time I played Valorant a bit more seriously was around Act 2 when Yoru came out. I got to gold just to prove myself that I can be somewhat decent at the game. I don't know if that proves anything. And then I stopped. Ironically, that's when Valorant's lore started kicking off. And it started kicking off in a really interesting way. Up until that point, the only source of Valorant's lore were hints scattered around the maps. And also some of the voice lines triggered throughout the game. And the story we got from that was on a very basic level. From piecing things together, we figured out that spikes were all about extracting a valuable resource known as Radianite. We learned that Radianite gave people superpowers. And that the agents were split into two categories. Agents with superpowers gained after exposure to Radianite, and agents with tech powered up by Radianite. Also, from the voice lines we learned that some agents had a bit of history with each other. Sometimes they dropped their real names, but that was really it. We didn't get any answers to the big questions like, why are the agents fighting themselves in the game? We thought this was overlooked because, well, gameplay doesn't have to make sense. I mean, look at League of Legends. But then the agents got voice lines referencing their mirror versions. So we knew something was going on, but Riot has not gone all out yet. All we got were Easter eggs around the maps. And for the entire first year, that's how Riot gave us the lore of this universe. But then, things changed. It all started in June 2020 when Riot released their first post-launch cinematic called Duelists. This is the one where Jet plants down a spike which made Venice rise into the air. This was the first story progression since release. But again, it didn't tell us much about what is really happening in the universe. It just showed us how the agents get deployed on missions. And it showed us what mishandling Radianite can look like. Following this, for the next 4 months, things stayed relatively quiet, as everyone focused on the actual gameplay. But then the Icebox map was released, which was a massive setup for the future stories. On this map, you could find ancient Japanese family armor. It was clear that someone was researching it. But then, a few patches later, the map was changed. And now it was clear that someone broke in and stole it. 3 months later, with the release of the Retake cinematic, we learned that it belonged to the new agent's family, which is Yoru. Apparently, it seemed like the Kingdom Corporation infused the armor with Radianite. As to whether that is actually true, we would learn much later. It only shows you how far Riot is planning the stories. Anyway, it did explain Yoru's abilities. And overall, this was the first time Riot showed us that they had actual plans for this universe. And interestingly enough, they chose to update this universe not through walls of text, but rather through environmental storytelling. This basically confirmed that while we wouldn't be getting a lot of lore, it would still feel very impactful when it dropped. However, what we didn't know back then is that Riot had a lot more up their sleeves than just updating tiny pieces of the maps. But that wouldn't come into play until a bit later. For the rest of 2021, Riot kept updating the lore of Valorant in a similar way to Yoru's release. Astra was released to set up her own story in the future, Breeze was released as a map that showed us that Radianite can be mined, and once again it showed us that the Kingdom Corporation keeps taking advantage of Radianite. But also, yet again, it was a setup for more environmental storytelling. After which, at the end of May 2021, we got the Duality cinematic. And this is where Riot's setup started kicking in, as their universe revealed a brand new twist. It was all about answering the biggest question the community had. What's the deal with fighting ourselves in the game? Well, it turns out you can fight an identical twin of yourself on the other team, because Valorant's universe has a mirror image. The way this was revealed was absolutely genius, because the cinematic is basically just Valorant's gameplay. You go in, you plant a spike, you try to defuse it. This made it so that you couldn't get confused. It simply showed you what the game was about. And that was an amazing foundation for all the story to come. The first payoff off of that was KO, an agent that is literally the Terminator from the future. He was designed to hunt down dangerous Radianite users, which is why all his abilities are all about suppressing Radianite. His release solidified that the core of Valorant's lore is all about traveling through time and space between dimensions. And since KO comes from 200 years in the future, he revealed quite a lot of lore about what is going to happen in this universe. Spoiler alert, the Radiant Wars between humans and Radianite users is not gonna be nice. It was implied that the war is gonna be started by Reyna, and apparently it is gonna divide the Valorant agents. The reason why KO decided to travel back in time is because the entire experience was really traumatic. He fought alongside Brimstone, who died, and he himself killed a few of the agents, like Astra, Skye or Reyna. So he came back through time to change this horrifying future. And the amazing part about this is how he traveled back in time. You see, when the Breeze map was introduced, it had an inactive portal in the background. You couldn't reach it, you couldn't interact with it, it was just there. But in a later patch, the portal came alive. After which, this knife was found in a nearby crate. And in the patch after that, KO was revealed. So again, through environmental storytelling, we learned that KO used this gateway to travel through time. And at this point, the story kept rolling. And 2 months later, it got even better. In September 2021, the Fracture map was revealed. This entire map is all about the two mirror images of Earth colliding. It is a massive research lab that connected the two universes so that the scientists from both sides could work together. That's why the entire map is split in half. On one side you can see our Earth, and on the other side you can see the mirror image. Through environmental storytelling alone, not only did we learn that both sides had mirror images of the same people in them, but also the same corporations, albeit slightly different. On our side, we have the Kingdom Corporation, who like to leverage Radianite for financial gains. But on the other side, we can find the Kingdom Industries, who are more aggressive with their research and who seem to be technologically advanced. I should also mention that this is when we got proper names for the two mirror images of Earth. Our side is called the Alpha Earth, and the other side is the Omega Earth. From the beginning, it was clear that this map was gonna be huge for lore. And indeed, Riot turned this one into a game changer. On top of just cinematics and map updates, Riot also updated the shooting range. Specifically, they left a phone on a couch. Apparently that phone belonged to Brimstone, and by interacting with it, you could listen to a voicemail. Yes, from this point on, for almost every patch, Riot sneaked a little lore update into the shooting range, which heavily tied everything together. And in the long term, this proved to be an amazing way to add onto the storytelling. Anyway, in the first voicemail, Killjoy talks about the Everett-Linde portal. This was the portal in the center of the Fracture map. There, the scientists from both sides were working on a Radianite particle accelerator. This new kind of info already pushed the story far, but Riot went further. On top of all of this, when the Fracture map was released onto live servers, for the next 8 patches, Riot kept hiding interactive objects around the map, which kept telling the story of this place as the lore progressed. Some of these objects were emails from the scientists, which was a great source of lore. But some of the other objects were connected to this symbol. Of course, a month later, this disaster was explained as the new agent Chamber came out to conclude the story. Long story short, Chamber was a rich man who made a deal with his counterpart on the Omega Earth. That's why in the reveal cinematic you can see them working together. And apparently the two made a deal about the particle accelerator. As was shown in the map reveal, they would both shoot the accelerator at the same time from their side to destroy it. We don't know what the Omega Chamber got from this, but the Alpha Chamber was able to get the blueprints of the accelerator from the other side. Remember, the other side is far more technologically advanced, so that tech was really valuable. And later he offered the blueprints to Brimstone, which got him recruited by the Valorant protocol. This entire story was amazing, and I only really scratched the surface. I mean, there were 5 voicemails connected to this, as well as 18 new emails and 2 unique interactive objects. The story of this place was great, and moving forward, Riot would carry this approach to their lore with them. But yet again, they would add onto it. Not only by also updating the older maps besides just releasing new ones. For example, after releasing Breeze, Riot went back to Icebox to give more lore to Yoru and Chamber, hinting that Yoru's mask was actually sent over from the Omega Earth, if not from the future. But Riot also started heavily leaning into using player cards as another source of lore. Some of these actually showed us the agent's history, as they picture key moments from their lives. And it is this combination of everything that is making Valorant's lore interesting. And every time Riot paid off one of their setups, which they prepared 3 acts ago, the success of this approach gets proven again. Don't believe me? Well, let me show you an excellent example. After Chamber was released, which destroyed the entire Fracture facility. Of course, Killjoy, being a scientist herself, had something to say about this. And so, we got this voicemail where Killjoy talks to Brimstone.
Brim, hey, it's me. Sorry, I keep thinking about Everett-Linde. They were light years ahead of us with their LRC program. It was sublime. The data on radionite exposure, the biome acceleration. Even in its failure, it can teach us so much. And yet, seeing the husk of the facility? It's the people. All those people. Brim, they weren't even soldiers. They were scientists. They didn't have a chance to... Sorry, I have to go. Call me back, please.
This heartbreaking message was actually an excellent setup. Earlier, Killjoy mentioned that the original Everett-Linde portal didn't have enough power, which is why only 1 patch later after the disaster, Neon was released. An agent that would become a human battery that could power up the new portal, which of course they could rebuild because they got the blueprints from Chamber. And that's because while Omega was advanced and they had ways to hop into the Alpha Earth didn't have the tech yet, which is what this entire storyline is about. But that's not the only thing. Killjoy also mentioned that Omega Earth had some great data on radionite exposure and biome acceleration, with the biome acceleration being related to the Pearl map, which would be released a bit later. Anyway, with this patch they concluded Chamber's story arc, Riot embraced the new way of storytelling through voicemails, and so they updated the shooting range yet again and revealed Brimstone's office. From that point on, players wouldn't have to randomly look around the shooting range. All the new lore updates could be found in Brimstone's computer. And the next agent would heavily utilize it. Because in the upcoming patch, the Valorant agent would start sending Brimstone messages about having nightmares, which was followed by mysterious emails that blackmailed everyone. Of course, all of this was from Fade, who revealed a lot of new info about the agents through these mails. Now, as I mentioned, the next stop was Pearl, a map that became another big landmark for the lore, which wasn't accessible immediately. Around patch 4.5, Killjoy successfully connected Alpha Earth to Omega Earth. In patch 4.8, the Valorant protocol recruited Fade. In patch 4.9, Fade was sent through the portal to scout out Omega Earth. For the next 4 patches, they were being careful about not revealing themselves. But eventually, in patch 5.0, more agents were sent through. which is also the patch when Pearl became a playable map. As a nice bonus, in 5.1 we also learned that Breach raided the other side. So yes, Pearl became the first map that takes place on the other side. Not only do we know this because this place is led by the Kingdom Industries, which come from the other side, unlike our Kingdom Corporation, but also processed radianite is orange on the other side. On Alpha Earth it is green. Once again, this is how Riot mastered subtle storytelling in Valorant. And I have to say, it works perfectly. Later, we even got more voicemails about the mysterious Atlas soldiers from the other side. Of course, this explains the Shattered cinematic. And after this, we got a long chain of voicemails about the Realm Task Force, who are focusing on recovering powerful artifacts, which led into the release of Harbor, a former Realm operative who went rogue after he learned how corrupt the organization was. Later, the Valorant protocol saves him and recruits him. Then Harbor, Astra and Killjoy research the secret City of Flowers. They find out it is located on Omega Earth and that it is a multiverse nexus. On top of this, if someone powers it up on Omega, since the city is in ruins on the Alpha side, there would be nothing to absorb the shock. And it would function as a massive nuke on the Alpha side. In case you are wondering, yes, the city is the new Lotus map. And it also explains what happened in the cinematic. Omega's Valorant Legion tried to power it up and make the Alpha side blow up. But at the end of the cinematic, someone planted down a spike which made it shut down at the last moment. And this brings us to where the most recent stories are. Fate started having horrifying visions about a destroyed, gory world. And if you look at the pattern, the chances are not only is she teasing a new agent, but also the next map. You see, and I didn't even get to talk about all the stories that are constantly happening in the background, such as the one with Raze and Killjoy, a story that was building up for more than a year, after which it got a really cool payoff. And I didn't even mention the most hidden recent teasers about the Guardians, a mysterious galactic race that is implied to be responsible for radianite, and to an extent it is linked to all the traveling through time and space. And that's how Valorant's lore affects the content we get. Or is it the content that affects the lore? Anyway, it seems like Riot has everything planned out way ahead. And even though it may seem like we are not getting too much new lore for Valorant, in reality there is a lot of lore happening in the background. You just need to connect the dots. And I have to say, my favorite dot generator are the voicemails. They can go from very serious topics to a bunch of children who are complaining to their dad that the others are taking their toys.
Brimstone, we're out of those little coffee pot things in the common room. I don't use them, but when they're gone, everyone starts drinking my tea. And please understand, it's very expensive tea. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. Ever since League slowed down, I suddenly got time to make more videos like this one, diving into all sorts of lore and worlds that I missed, which also happened to include Valorant. If you wanna learn more about the future videos I'm working on, feel free to become a member of the channel, where I'm constantly teasing future videos. Also, I am currently playing Genshin Impact for the first time on my streams, and so far it is quite a ride.